Here's something that might surprise you. Some of the sharpest, most emotionally in tune people you'll ever come across are also some of the most worn out. Not because they're doing too much, but because they think too much. They're still replaying a conversation hours after it ended. They're running through scenarios that may never even play out. They're staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., not because anything went wrong, but because their brains simply won't stop asking, but what if? And here's where the psychological paradox comes in. The very mental habit that makes someone thoughtful, considerate, and deeply empathetic is the exact same habit that slowly drains them dry. Today, we're diving into the psychology behind people who overthink. What's actually going on inside their brain, where this pattern comes from, and what it truly says about the kind of person they are. So let's start with what science actually calls this. Psychologists have a term for it: maladaptive rumination. It's the mind's tendency to keep returning to the same thought loops over and over, especially around uncertainty, past interactions, or things left unresolved. Research from Yale and the University of Michigan has found that people who ruminate aren't doing it out of weakness or anxiety. In a lot of cases, it's because their brain is unusually skilled at recognizing patterns. It's constantly scanning, constantly processing, constantly searching for meaning. The issue isn't the intelligence itself. It's that the system never receives a signal telling it to stop.
On a neurological level, this traces back to a part of the brain you've likely heard of, the prefrontal cortex. This is the region that handles planning, analysis, and self-reflection. In overthinkers, it tends to remain highly active, even during rest. On top of that, the default mode network, the brain's background processing system, keeps producing an internal stream of thought. The end result is a mind that's essentially always running, always reviewing, always drafting replies to conversations that haven't even happened. And what's even more interesting is that this rarely begins in adulthood. For most overthinkers, the pattern takes root in childhood or the teenage years, often in environments where things felt unpredictable. When a child grows up around shifting moods or situations where small mistakes led to big consequences, the brain develops a very logical defense. Think ahead, anticipate everything. If you can see what's coming, maybe you can get ahead of it. Seen through that lens, overthinking isn't a character flaw, it's an adaptation. A smart, capable nervous system doing exactly what it was conditioned to do. Now, here's where it gets nuanced. Not all overthinking is the same. Psychologists typically break it into two distinct categories. The first is reflective rumination, turning inward to process emotions, better understand yourself, and make sense of your experiences. In healthy doses, this is actually a strength. It's tied to higher emotional intelligence and a deeper level of self-awareness.
The second is brooding rumination, a more passive, more painful pattern of dwelling on problems without ever moving toward any kind of resolution. This is where the real cost shows up: disrupted sleep, decision paralysis, and social anxiety fueled by overanalyzing every single interaction. The difficult part? Most overthinkers shift between both without realizing it. A moment of genuine reflection can quietly slide into a full spiral. And because the thinking feels productive, because the brain is engaged and active, it's genuinely hard to recognize when you've stopped processing and started looping. Cognitive psychologists call this the illusion of mental progress. The mind feels like it's working towards something, but really it's just going in circles. And dopamine plays a role here too. The brain releases small hits of dopamine during problem solving, even imagined problem solving. So when an overthinker works through a scenario from every angle, builds out the mental arguments, plays out all the possible outcomes, the brain is actually being rewarded just for the act of thinking, not for reaching an answer, just for the process itself. That's why just stop thinking about it is neurologically useless advice. The brain has a chemical reason to keep going. So what does all of this actually say about a person? The research might not point where you'd expect.
A 2013 study in Psychological Science found that people who reported higher levels of rumination also scored significantly higher on measures of cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and anticipate how others think and feel. They tend to be more attuned to social subtlety, more conscious of how their words come across, more aware of the unspoken emotional structure in a room. The very engine powering all that exhausting overthinking is also what makes these people remarkably perceptive human beings. But perception without resolution is draining, and that's the tension overthinkers carry with them. They pick up on everything. They feel the full weight of every possibility. And yet, the more they think, the further clarity seems to drift. Because here's the quiet truth that psychology keeps returning to. The mind cannot think its way out of every problem. Some things have to be felt, decided, or simply let go, not solved.
Therapists who specialize in chronic overthinking often don't focus on stopping the thoughts. Instead, they work on changing the relationship to them. Acceptance and commitment therapy, for example, introduces a concept called cognitive diffusion, learning to observe your thoughts without getting pulled into them, noticing the loop without being swept up in it. It's a subtle shift, but a powerful one. Instead of, this is a serious problem and I need to figure it out right now, the reframe becomes, my brain is producing a concern. One draws you in. The other gives you just enough distance to breathe. And all of this points to something that goes beyond the individual. Overthinking is not a personality defect. It is not a sign of weakness or instability. At its core, it's a highly active mind that learned to stay on guard in a world that once felt unsafe. The goal isn't to silence the thinking completely. The goal is to help that mind, gently, patiently, understand that it's finally okay to rest. And maybe that's the most deeply human part of all this. We all carry mental patterns shaped by experiences we never asked for. Understanding those patterns doesn't make them disappear, but it does strip away some of their power. And sometimes that understanding is exactly where healing begins.